The House of Representatives has passed its version of the Big Beautiful Bill, and it contains some really nasty and devastating provisions for America's national parks and public lands. But several particularly devastating provisions were ultimately removed from this bill, an indication that public pressure is working when it comes to public lands conservation efforts. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how the House version of the Big Beautiful Bill impacts national parks and public lands, and let you know what to expect as the bill moves to the Senate. We'll start with the impacts to the National Park Service, which stands to see its remaining $275 million of Inflation Reduction Act funding eliminated. Remember that the Inflation Reduction Act was already signed into law, and this money was already allocated for various projects and improvements across the national park system. In particular, this money was to be used to fill the critical staffing deficiencies at the National Park Service. Before this year even started, Park Service staffing was already down about 20% compared to 2010 levels. And now, since the Trump administration took office again earlier this year, NPS staffing levels have been reduced by a further 13% due to forced buyouts and early retirement efforts, not to mention the plight of the probationary workers. The agency's staffing levels are mission critical right now, and without the appropriate staff, we're likely to see significant impacts to resource preservation efforts, search and rescue operations, and wildfire management, not to mention the complete gutting we have seen of the regional offices and the national headquarters. Eliminating this $275 million of already appropriated funding is only going to exacerbate all of these issues. One of the other big provisions in this bill is the removal of protections on more than 225,000 acres in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota as part of the Superior National Forest, and the most popular wilderness area in the country. Mineral leases that were previously canceled have been reinstated, and on top of that, new leases have been issued. And on top of that, the public comment and environmental review processes have been completely eliminated. The provisions in this bill would directly threaten one of the most clean and pristine watersheds left in the United States and impact recreation opportunities for millions. The Boundary Waters aren't the only pristine wilderness to be under attack from this bill, though. The ever-threatened Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is back on the chopping block again. The bill mandates 4 oil and gas leasing sales over 10 years, each one over 400,000 acres, in one of the last remaining true wilderness areas on this planet. And on top of that, I'm kind of sensing a theme here, the public input and judicial review processes were eliminated. This one makes even less sense when you consider that a lease sale was already held in ANWR earlier this January, and nobody bid on it. Nobody wanted to drill there, and yet these unpopular, very unpopular provisions continue to be pushed forward. And then there's a whole host of provisions that aren't really focused on a specific place, but still concern large swaths of public lands and what happens on them. Oil and gas drilling is, of course, being pushed across the board. This bill would mandate quarterly lease sales in most Western states, including sensitive environmental and cultural areas. Chaco Canyon National Historical Park, for instance, has been the poster child for this sort of issue for decades already. It requires the BLM to offer all of its industry-nominated lands in the next 18 months, brings back non-competitive leasing practices, introduces protest filing fees, and reduces federal royalty rates from 16.67% to 12.5%. Oh, and it also makes it way more expensive to develop wind and solar energy. Again, this makes no sense. Americans do not want their parks and public lands to be destroyed through unfettered oil and gas leasing. The outdoor recreation industry is a $1 trillion industry in the United States, outpacing the entire oil and gas sector. It makes more sense, economically, culturally, and naturally, to keep these places protected rather than offer them up for unrestricted oil and gas development. But it's not just oil and gas, though. Logging also got its own sweetheart deal in the bill, too. The bill mandates that the U.S. Forest Service double the amount of timber sales it offers. And that's already on top of the administrative action we've already seen taken by the Trump administration to open up more than 60% of our national forests, over 112 million acres, for logging operations. Again, this makes no sense. The National Parks Traveler has reported on this, that logging on private land is already overproducing timber by 53%, meaning they are producing more trees than they are able to cut down. Flooding the market with timber from public lands that is absolutely not necessary would only drive the price down and hurt the private timber industry. And finally, there's the continued attacks on the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, one of the strongest pieces of environmental legislation in this country. This law would allow companies to pay to fast-track their environmental reviews, completely bypassing our premier environmental law. Oh, and yeah, it also eliminates judicial review. Again, a common theme here. This is just the big, impactful stuff too. There's more in there related to things like coal leasing and offshore oil and gas leasing and other environmentally destructive measures as well. The link to the full natural resources section is linked in the description down below if you would like to go and read it and or just be depressed. So you can see that this big, beautiful bill is a big, beautiful nightmare for parks and public lands. But there were two significant provisions that were ultimately dropped from the final House version of the bill. The mandated approval of the Ambler Mining Road through the gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve, which has already been defeated 2 times already, but anyway, that's out now, and the sell-off of 500,000 acres of public land in Utah and Nevada. That was dropped as well. The removal of these provisions is proof that public input works. They are proof that our voices still matter. Look at all of the provisions in this bill that are deeply, deeply, deeply unpopular. Drilling in ANWR, nobody wants that. Mining in the boundary waters, nobody wants that. Dismantling of environmental safeguards, nobody wants that. Increased drilling and logging on public lands, nobody wants that. Attacks on the national parks, nobody wants that. Americans do not want these things to happen. They are deeply, deeply unpopular. But they are in this bill because these politicians think that they're not accountable to us. These provisions are in the bill to please campaign donors and corporate interests and extractive industries. But the removal of certain provisions from the bill also show that our voices still matter and that we can still make a difference. We got the Ambler Road thing removed and we got the public land sell-off removed, which is why we need to keep up the pressure as the bill moves to the Senate. This bill is not yet law, and already Utah Senator Mike Lee has said he's going to reintroduce the public land sell-off amendment. He knows it's unpopular, which is why he's trying to ram it through a reconciliation bill that is filibuster-proof. So let's make it tougher for him to do that. Let's keep speaking up, keep contacting our lawmakers, especially if you live in Western states with lots of public land. I know it's tough, guys. It's exhausting. I'm tired just like you are. And I know it feels like you've heard this a million times already, probably because you have, but we have to contact our representatives. I get it. It feels like we don't have any power, but we do. We have already proven that we do. This stuff works, even when it seems like it doesn't. Keep up that pressure. Let's keep fighting for our parks and public lands. Let's use the power that we know we have, that we've demonstrated that we have. Also, this is not the same thing as the Trump budget proposal, which is proposing to cut over $1 billion in national park funding, but potentially eliminating over 350 national park sites in America, returning some of them to the states. That's a whole different thing that is not related to the reconciliation process. It is a bit complicated and they both have budget in the title, but if you do want me to make a video on that, on the Trump budget proposal, please do let me know that down in the comments. But that is it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Again, contact your representatives if you want to support me. I always appreciate it over on Patreon. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.